I just wanted to mention this now in case not everybody's here at the end. A lot of the stuff that I work with you can go to just by going to my website, gregoryjenks.com, and look across the links that are across the page. Okay, you can see various things. So if you go to video, okay. So now we're actually live on the website. Actually, I've forgotten that
Sorry, I never sneeze once.
Okay, so if you click on video, and this is where I'll put the videos from today. Okay, so that's various talks I've been giving in the last little while, and I'm just recording them and putting them on there. So you'll be able, there's lectures from Sir Francis College, whatever. So I'll just make a cluster of things from today and put it on that website. So just gregoryjenks.com and then click on the link to video or type video in at the end. Okay? Alright, let's go back into where we were. Okay. Alright, so what I want to do in this session is just introduce some issues about the curriculum implications of what we've been talking about so far today. Okay? So, and it may have felt at times like you're a bit of a theological roller coaster. Okay? There's a bit of a dive into some of the more wilder edges of biblical studies. There are obviously biblical scholars who prefer to do their craft by reassuring you that everything's okay. Okay? Everything's okay. The Bible is there. God's in charge. Everything's okay. Alright? Have a Bex, lie down. Okay. I'm not one of those Bible scholars. Okay? I prefer to play on the wild side and see what happens. Yeah, and that's fine. That's part of the rich diversity of being Anglican, let alone being Christian. Okay. So, you don't have to believe anything I've said. Okay? You're perfectly entitled to be mistaken. No, you just take everything I say with a grain of salt. And what I expect my students to do, and they're basically people doing Bachelor of Theology degree, but I expect them to learn to think for themselves. And the last thing I want when I'm marking their essays is that I'm reading pretty poor translations of my own ideas. Okay? I'd much rather see what they're doing, what they're thinking about, how they're using the material and so on. So, but part of what I'd be saying is that there is a whole world of religion scholarship, and the church sits pretty uncomfortably with it, because the world of religion scholarship does not dance to the tune played by the church. Now, that creates some potential for tension. It also creates some potential for fresh insights and for reinvigoration. And people like me have to live on that, like the fault line running up through the middle of East Africa to the Jordan Valley. You live on the fault line. And some days are easier than others because you're living with those ambiguities. But I guess part of religion historically has wanted to offer us certainty. Believe this and all will be well. Okay? Now, actually, I think that's a misreading of what religion is about, or could be about, or should be about. And I want to tap onto my religious tradition in a quest for what I've stolen these words from Rowan Williams. Shaping lives that are holy and true. Okay, it's not about being right, but it's about trying to get the kind of practical spiritual wisdom which will help people like me, people like you, shape lives that are holy and true or authentic. And actually being right is the least important part of it. Being responsive, being alert, being focused on authenticity, they're the things that matter more than being right. Okay? So in that sense, theology is more like art. Okay? And yes, there are ways of evaluating whether an art student has done a good piece of work, but it won't come down to being right or wrong. That's really not the set of criteria that apply to evaluating art. And I suspect theology is more to do with poetry than with final truth, as it were. I'm not sure if you are wanting to jump in with a question or observation there, or just stretching your arm. You right? Wasn't sure if you were just trying to catch my eye.
Thank you.
That's okay. So, so this all has implications for curriculum. Now, one of the issues is which expression of religion scholarship do we tap into? Okay. Including whether we're simply looking at an RE curriculum for SRE, or whether we're looking at a religious studies curriculum for a K-12 religious school, which won't primarily be about religion, but religion will be an intentional element through the whole of the school's life. And so what kind of scholarship are we wanting and choosing to tap into? Everything's okay, darling, just sit down and have a Bex? Or how might, if we were to engage with this tradition seriously, how might it change the way we do everything, including how we do church? Okay, which means all bets are off. Okay, and that's way more exciting and way more dangerous. And yeah, that's, I guess, the end of the market I prefer to work with. Anyway, so there'll be choices that people have to make in those respects. So let's have a look at I want to introduce some of the curriculum issues and then see where we go with it. And one of the ways we might go with it is simply to divide into 2 or 3 small groups, maybe one around the what I guess is called the junior school at Lindisfarne, is that right? And so I guess there's junior, middle, senior school.
It's junior and senior.
Yeah, and the senior and middle.
Middle and junior together.
Okay. So what's on this campus now? I thought it was 5 to 12.
5 to 12, with 5 to 6 still attached to the junior.
Okay.
Structure.
Yeah, even though they're half an hour apart or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, know that scene. Okay, they were only 10 minutes apart in Forest Lake, but there's a big difference if half the junior school is on that campus and the other half of the middle school or whatever's on this campus. But yeah. Okay, so we might just work more in terms of junior school and senior school, for instance, and then maybe SRE as well. And just look at some of the issues. Now, amongst the issues that have already come up in conversation are things like, if we want our students in the senior school, 10, 11, 12, to be having these kinds of conversations, then what do we need to be doing with them in middle and junior school so they're ready for those kinds of conversations? That to me is the big unaddressed curriculum issue. Because in my experience, a lot of the curriculum programs that have come out are not much different from a Sunday school curriculum. And it just so look up the Bible, find the information, write it out, kind of stuff. And I don't think we would do that in any other discipline area. But there are different. Now, my general view is that I think we have a lot to learn from Catholic schools in terms of how they integrate religion and religious studies within their total curriculum and their school ethos. And things like global studies, for instance, might provide a way for religion to be a theme which is pursued along with geography and history and English rather than being a separate subject. But these are all school-based curriculum priority type questions that not for me to call.
This year that's what we've done with our primary school curriculum. It's taken from the Western Australian program that was done in the schools, and it's basically around things from friendship, which has to do with bullying and relationships, etc. It has to do with ecology, therefore how to look after the environment and Jesus and the ecology. So, and I've given the teachers in the primary school the opportunity to do the module, one of the 4 modules for this year, whenever they want to do it, so it fits in with the other curriculum that they're using. So
Exactly.
if they're doing other stuff on environment, etc., then do the unit on Jesus and the environment, then it becomes an organic whole, not a add-on subject to do just because they're a religion. Yeah.
Or even not even Jesus and the environment, but what does the Bible have to say to us, or what does our religious tradition have to say? You might pick on St. Francis rather than Jesus, for instance. We did, when I was at Forest Lake College, which is now St. John's Anglican College, one of the things we did towards the end of my time, was particularly for the junior school campus, was to sit down with the teachers and say, you show me what your work program is, as your curriculum shape, in years 1, 2, 3, what are the big themes you're working with in the 1, 2, 3? Now, what kind of religious content might actually contribute to a discussion of this and exploring that? So the religion simply becomes a dimension of the wider curriculum rather than that 20 minutes a week when we do the God stuff or something.
Yeah, well, I would think that a lot of our teachers don't even do the 20 minutes a week. They take it and use it as part of
It's
what
great.
they're doing. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing
Yeah.
I want to see, that you integrate it into the program.
The other sort of, and we'll come back on topic in a second, the other thing we tried, and again it was just in my final year at Forest Lake, we were able to have 10 and 11, 12 were programmed on the one line. And so we had religion, or spiritual development as it was called, in the same periods, and we got 3 or 4 periods a week for religion, which is unusual for an Anglican school. But 10s, 11s and 12s were all on the same line. So we actually had the potential to have about 18 form classes all doing religion at literally the same time, 3 or 4 times a week. So that gave us the capacity to actually work with the cohort of the senior school instead of 10A or whatever. And so I went around over the summer, I went around the staff rooms and spoke to the various subject teachers, everybody from the sports teacher to the dance teacher or whatever, and invited them to develop an elective unit which they would offer every semester, every term actually, because there are 2 terms in a semester, but the students would rotate through and the students would choose. And they didn't have to do all of them, but they would choose which ones they went to. And so we had things like one of the English teachers did a Jesus in Film elective. I did the one on Bible and archaeology that I mentioned earlier. The dance teacher did a module on liturgical dance. Music teacher did a thing on liturgical music or God and music. The maths teacher did one on maths, meaning and mystery, Pythagoras and all that stuff. The sports teacher was a bit puzzled. This was 7 or 8 years ago, and I said I want him to do something on spirituality and sport. And he went, I said, Shane Warne. He said, got it. And so on. So basically what that meant was each of those teachers was actually teaching out of their area of personal strength and expertise. And they were being invited to do a theological reflection on the thing that mattered most to them in terms of their knowledge area. Okay? And it flew. People just loved it. And the teachers loved it. And the kids got a choice. They signed up like uni, and they had 3 choices. One of the teachers got sexual health, I think, was her topic, and 3/4 of the kids put that as their first. just one. So only the maximum of 25 or so in a group. But nobody got lower than their second choice. Okay, in the first time around. Then, of course, they chose a different topic in term 2, term 3, term 4. But the classroom dynamics totally changed because the kids felt they were in control of what they were doing. I'm choosing to do this subject with so-and-so, rather than, here comes that lesson I don't want to do kind of thing. And the teachers were totally transformed in terms of working out of their area of strength. And my job became how to provide some theological, philosophical kind of resources to help them reflect on their own body of knowledge to develop an interesting program that went for 8 or 9 weeks or whatever. But still had about 3 sessions a week in every week. So it was a fun thing to try. And I think I left and a new chaplain came and things changed, but it seemed to work really well at that point in the food cycle. Okay, so let's look at some of the bigger picture issues in terms of the curriculum. For me, one of the big issues is what do we do about religion as the 4th R? Okay, religious literacy. So they're going to do reading, writing and arithmetic, but what about religion? So, and especially in an Anglican school, what can we do about making sure that one of the distinctive graduate outcomes of an Anglican school is that the students have a degree of religious literacy? And what would religious literacy look like? And then how do we work back from our graduate outcomes to what our inputs are going to be in terms of junior school, middle school, senior school? For instance, religious literacy, from my mind, would include things like knowing how to celebrate really well and having the capacity to draw on a rich tradition and indeed a multi-faith tradition for ritual and ceremonial, which in Australia we don't do much beyond Anzac Day. Okay, so the question becomes, does our total school experience offer opportunities for students to learn and to become adept in ritualising in appropriate ways the things that matter to them, both positive and negative? So we don't have to wait till the terrible car accident that takes out 3 of last year's Year 12s to actually learn how to grieve collectively, because we've learned how to do that. We've had various class-based, year-level-based, campus-based activities where we've actually learned the skills of ritualising the things that matter to us and that shape us as a community. Of which, Anzac Day is one, but there are many other potential things we can do. Sorry?
You'd have to incorporate some of the legend part of the Old Testament.
I have absolutely no trouble incorporating everything in the Old Testament. I just don't take it literally.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Because if they take it as legend as well, legends such as King Arthur and others they inform your later life in certain ways. Like poetry, you'd have to incorporate some of the psalms. Do you want to start this?
Oh, well, I'm just doing an intro and then we're going to break into groups and you can work on that. But you're right. So, that's good. You're starting to say, we could do this, we could do that. Yeah. Now, the context is going to be very different. So within the context of SRE, I'm assuming there are local ecumenical and indeed education department contractual kind of arrangements. You can't just design a curriculum from scratch, okay, around my nutty ideas or whatever. And similarly in a school, there are larger dynamics of curriculum planning and approval and negotiating with heads of department, principals, college council, bishop, whatever. But within a larger trajectory, it should surely be possible to identify some attributes of religious literacy, which would include how to use text, but also how to use symbol and how to engage in religious practice. Now, I know that the school has a particular investment because of the work that Glenn's been doing on religious practice, meditation, reflection. That to me is an essential part of religious literacy. What would be the point of if we did succeed in teaching the kids the Bible, but we'd never help them to learn how to pray? Okay, there'd be some use, but it's not the outcome we want. Okay, we want them, for those who are interested in exploring religious practice, whether as an explicitly Christian or a more inclusive understanding, and obviously the school operates from a Christian perspective, but we can welcome and affirm and facilitate other expressions of spiritual practice as well. That's part of my theology of hospitality. Okay? So we want not only... So it gets to, we're sort of dealing with the theological equivalence of knowledge, skills, and perspective or feelings and so on. So across the curriculum model would have graduate outcomes which include content, include skills or practice, and also include values. Okay, and no two graduates will be identical, but it would be good if they could have, people graduating from the school gained a reputation for actually they've got a really good grasp of the tradition, which is bigger than Bible, but includes other stuff, but Bible is big. They've actually got a capacity to practice their own religious faith, whatever it turns out to be. They know how to be compassionate. They know how to be reflective. Okay? And they've got the sort of values that were really important to us as people of Christian faith, which includes compassion and justice and all kinds of other things, love and joy and hope and so on. So that'd be my draft starting point for a statement of graduate outcomes. Certainly affirming, I'd want the curriculum and in my thing I was working on would certainly be taking the Bible very seriously as core text. Okay? But learning to read it in ways that are more than simply literalistic, learning to read it from a number of nuanced perspectives. So engaging critically with the scriptures is as important for me as simply acquiring the content, some knowledge of the content. Okay? I mean, there's enough content in there that we would not want ever read out on a school assembly, okay, because of the giggle factor, okay, and the embarrassment factor, etc. So how do we teach people to engage appropriately and critically with some of that stuff? What's going on? I mean, even the fact that the Bible is overwhelmingly male-centered. Okay, and yes, we can do what we can to retrieve some of the female characters, but end of the day, the Bible will still be predominantly a male story. So we've got to deal with that and critique it, not simply say, well, that's just how it has been, but it's not how it is anymore. Okay, so the Bible doesn't limit what we can reach to; it simply tells us where we've come from. Exploring the three worlds may be part of it. It may well be that at different points in the cycle, curriculum cycle, as it were, it'll be more appropriate just to get on top of the content of the Bible, some of the core Bible stories and so on. At other times, it'll be really important. For instance, you could do a unit easily, a couple of weeks at least, on what might a village have been like in biblical times. Okay? And what sort of activities and how did people live and what did their houses look like and so on. Now all of that is just providing grist for the mill for later on when they encounter biblical content that mentions village life or people living in domestic situations, because otherwise we naturally project our experience back on to them. And our experience of living in villages and towns and so on is totally different from the ancient past and so on. And ultimately engaging more with sort of critical biblical scholarship, which will be more, I suspect, a senior school kind of perspective. The point of all this is that who we are and who our students are is going to be shaped by the way we read the Bible, and particularly when we're taking the Bible as canon, as authoritative benchmark kind of material. And a scholar called James Sanders has argued that what a canon does is that it addresses the question of identity and lifestyle. Okay, so the Bible as canon, or the Old Testament as canon, or whatever, addresses the question of who are we in this community and what are the ways we find it appropriate to live.
I would just ask, that's different to canon law.
Yeah, and we have canon law as well. Canon is used in that term is used in a couple of different ways, including big guns that go bang as well, obviously. So yeah, canon, when it's used in the sense of canon law, is about church rules, church legislation. When we talk about the sort of canon of Western literature or canonical text, we're talking about texts that have an authoritative status, which is a bit like canonical law, but they're authoritative. And the ancient word simply means rule. The canon is like a ruler, and it set the measure. And then we also use canons for people in the cathedral or senior priests with like the badge for long service or whatever. So
that means other very serious texts, historical texts, would also have canon.
Yes, people talk about the canon of Western literature. I mean things like Shakespeare and various other classics. And the sort of canon of Western music. And
touchstone bits of literature.
Yeah, so
life.
Now, part of what the scholarship will eventually alert people to is that, of course, there's not a single form of the Christian Bible, because in different parts of the world, the Christian Bible has slightly different shape and content. For instance, I guess I probably knew this somewhere in the dark recesses of my head, but I was reminded last week at a research seminar that Pontius Pilate was canonized in the Ethiopian church in the 8th century. Okay?
Why?
Because he was seen as the person through whom Christ was able to offer his sacrifice. And so he came to be seen as being almost like a priest presiding at the sacrifice of the Lamb of God. Okay? Now, Now that's not the way our brains are wired in the West to think about Pontius Pilate, but it is more in common with an Eastern way of thinking about Pilate, where Pilate and his wife Procula, who of course is not named in the Bible, but the tradition fills in the gaps, are both seen as saints and are remembered with thanksgiving in the life of the church. So So even just understanding that the immense diversity of the expressions of Christianity.
I think
And,
in
yeah.
Papua New Guinea they don't call it the Lamb of God, they call it the Pig of God.
Yeah, well, sheep are not
They don't-
really part of their cultural
No,
context.
it's just-
Yeah. So both in the forms of the Bible, but also expressions of Christianity. There's a lot more to Christianity than Northwest Europe after the Reformation. It's a big, wild, interesting place out there. And that's part of religious literacy. Kids should not only be learning about Islam and Buddhism, but about diversity within Christianity. Because we want them to be well informed, we want them to be literate in the religious tradition. And from a theological perspective, we're offering them exposure and engagement with texts which will offer them a sense of identity and the basis for lifestyle. Okay? It doesn't mean that everybody reads the Bible, comes to the same decisions, but that it's in our process of engagement, like those 3 circles are up on the thing. As we deal with the text from our own context, we will be working with issues of identity and lifestyle. Okay, and so, as I've already alluded to, we won't just be offering, I would guess, some sort of monochrome expression of Christianity and of religious education. I would think we want to proudly, confidently celebrate and affirm the things that are important to our tradition as Anglicans. Okay? But that can be done in ways that also acknowledge there are other ways of being religious, there are other ways of being Christian, and there are some commonalities and there are some significant differences. And how do we deal with them? So celebrating difference and respecting the other, I guess, would be on my list of personal attributes of the ideal graduate from my religion program. That they'd know what they believe, whatever it happened to be, but they'd also be able to celebrate difference and respect others while being appropriately confident in their capacity to understand and to draw on their own tradition. They're the kinds of things I'd be looking at. So then the part of the challenge becomes, so what role does the Bible play in such a curriculum? And excuse me, and what role does more contemporary critical religion scholarship play in the shaping of the curriculum in which the Bible has such a part? All right, so that's probably enough introduction. Really what I'd suggest we do is use the next 45 minutes or so to work in small groups, maybe around the senior school curriculum issues, the middle school and the SRE curriculum issues. How will those groups work for people?